Going to start the day right. And why, you may wonder? Well, because we are the lucky ones that will start the morning in the company of one of Spain's most renowned mindfulness experts and a well-known personality for many other reasons. He is a doctor by profession, an expert in motivation, creativity, communication, and in leadership. But he's much more than that. He's also a lecturer, a writer, a speaker, a very good friend of South Summit, and he's here today to give us some tips on how to stay calm amidst the storm. And he's going to do so through a guided mindfulness session. So please, let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Mario Alonso.
Good morning, and thank you for coming. We're going to talk about something which is quite slippery, so it's not that easy to have a deep sense of what mindfulness is about. Maybe some of you have some connection with mindfulness already, you have practiced it for some time, or it might be for you the first exposure to this kind of approach, which has a philosophy and has a different set of techniques, a different tool of ways of dealing with this hectic mind that sometimes creates so many troubles in our lives. And some people have a lot of experience with mindfulness, and they are very interested with the new findings in neurosciences in which we see how mindfulness really has an impact in the brain, has an impact in how the neurons, the brain cells, relate with each other, how they connect, how they create new projections, new synapses. So we will start, like understanding where mindfulness is coming from, why it's having such a huge impact, why they're teaching mindfulness in Silicon Valley, why many people who are building their own companies are practicing mindfulness daily, why they're a lot of patients in hospitals like MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, the Harvard Medical System, Stanford, Berkeley, why they are practicing it when they are fighting against a disease that might be a malignant disease, why in the teaching system they are showing little kids, 4-year-old kids, 6-year-old kids, how they can use mindfulness in order to cope with their exams, with their challenges in a different way. So the reason why mindfulness is such a interesting idea nowadays has a lot to do with sciences, with neurosciences, especially with some of my mentors who were the people who risking to be in some way rejected by there's a lot of noise over there. Do you hear it? There's a lot of noise over there. I know what's that. Okay. So some researchers who were really pioneers, and they decided, despite the fact that they, at that time, some of them were rejected by the scientific community, they decided to do some research about this strange thing called mindfulness, meditation, sati, vipassana, things that have different names, but in the end, they speak about the same thing. So for me, it's very important that you leave this room with a sense of what mindfulness is, so in case that you want to do further research, and also that you can experience in your own bodies, in your minds, the impact of mindfulness. We don't have that much time. We have 36 minutes, but I think we have enough time to at least enjoy this session. There are three keys that have been discovered throughout human history. 3 keys that were quite subtle, not that easy to find, and which explain to us something very, very surprising. We are called Homo sapiens sapiens because it's supposed that we are the most intelligent creature in nature, and well, we see all the, the technology that we can see in this event. We can see a lot of progress in different areas, in science, in technology, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we have the idea that something in us is not working well. The name Homo Demens tries to explain or tries to convey this idea about something in us that is not working properly. It's the origin of violence, it's the origin of many diseases, it's the origin of a lack of effectiveness and efficiency in our daily lives. It's a source of scarcity. Where is this coming from? Is this that we as human beings have an evil nature? Is it that our heart is rotten? What's at the root of this problem? 2,500 years ago, some Greek physicians discovered something amazing. That was the first key. They discovered that when you engage in a conversation with a patient, when you're a doctor, in my case, I'm a doctor, I'm a surgeon. If I engage in a conversation, in a tender conversation, in an opening way of listening with a patient, something quite amazing starts to happen in that patient. Some physicians, like Hippocrates, had the power to create healing just by human touch, just by creating that kind of emotional bond. And a group of physicians from his same school learned that technique, learned that approach, and they were also remarkable in the way they could help that healing process take place. But they didn't know what was working. What was the cause of this healing? What was really fighting against that disease? Because it was nothing that they have given the patients. It was not any kind of herb, any kind of remedy, physical remedy. It was something that happened within the patient. But the end result was that those patients were healed from very severe diseases. So they call it the medical art, because for them it was not like a science, it was more like an art, the art of connection with other people. Now we know what's going on. Now we know from the field of sciences, especially from the field of physiology, human physiology, we know that below our consciousness there are two nervous systems working on, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. When we are under the influence of the sympathetic nervous system, we are in an alarm mode. We feel fear, we feel threatened, and that's not good for our body. When we are under the influence of the parasympathetic nervous system, then we relax, we calm down, and the healing process starts to take over. So what these Greek physicians did without knowing what they were doing, of course, was they were in some way addressing the parasympathetic nervous system so that that part of the system started to take over and the healing process started to happen. This is one of the most remarkable researchers in the field of stress. I had the opportunity of meeting him in Mexico. We were invited to give a talk. He's a very gentle person, a very smart person. He works at Stanford. And he has been conducting research in the field of stress for many, many years. Now he spends most of his time in the United States, but for a long period in his life, he devoted half of the year to study monkeys in Kenya, and the rest of the year he spent doing research in his lab at Stanford. So there is a very brief video, which I think is worth seeing, in which he describes part of this kind of Homo Demens nature. Why, if we are smarter than other creatures in the world, why we express this violence, this ineffectiveness, this way of getting sick without having any problem, any real physical problem in our inner organs. So let's watch the video. Let me see if it works. Okay. It's based on his remarkable book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
if you're a normal mammal, what stress is about is 3 minutes of screaming terror on the savannah, after which it's either over with or you're over with.
For a few weeks every year or so, Sapolsky shifts his lab to a place more than 9,000 miles away on the plains of the Masai Mara Reserve in Kenya, East Africa.
You live in a place like this, you're a baboon, and you only have to spend about 3 hours a day getting your calories. And if you only have to work 3 hours a day, you got 9 hours of free time every day to devote to making somebody else just miserable. They're not being stressed by lions chasing them all the time. They're being stressed by each other. They're being stressed by social and psychological tumult invented by their own species. They're a perfect model for westernized stress-related disease. Because what stress is about is somebody is very intent on eating you, or you are very intent on eating somebody, and there's an immediate crisis going on.
When you run for your life, basics are all that matter. Lungs work overtime to pump mammoth quantities of oxygen into the bloodstream. The heart races to pump that oxygen throughout the body, so muscles respond instantly.
You need your blood pressure up to deliver that energy. You need to turn off anything that's not essential. Growth, reproduction, you're running for your life. This is no time to ovulate. Tissue repair, all that sort of thing. Do it later if there is a later.
When the zebra escapes, its stress response shuts down. But human beings can't seem to find their off switch.
We turn on the exact same stress response for purely psychological states, thinking about the ozone layer, the taxes coming up, mortality, 30-year mortgages. We turn on the same stress response, and the key difference there is we're not doing it for a real physiological reason, and we're doing it non-stop. After a while, the stress response is more damaging than the stressor itself, because the stressor is some psychological nonsense that you're falling for. No zebra on Earth running for its life would understand why fear of speaking in public would cause you to secrete the same hormones that it's doing at that point to save its life.
Now we can understand much better what the Greek physicians 2,500 years ago discovered. They discovered a way of reducing the stress in the patients. Of course, they didn't know anything about stress. It was many, many years ago. But they discovered an approach in which, without knowing that, the stress was disappearing. And as a consequence, the healing process was happening. Of course, until many, many years afterwards, we didn't know that the stress had a relationship, had an intimate relationship with disease. So a patient had a disease 2,500 years ago in Greece. They tried a lot of remedies with that patient. That patient couldn't really be effective at the time of dealing with the disease. Some of these patients went to those very special Greek physicians, and they, through that kind of emotional bonding, were able, beyond their awareness, to release, to reduce that level of stress. As a consequence, the parasympathetic nervous system took over. Remember that when we're under stress, it's the sympathetic nervous system, the one which is running the show. But when we, let that pressure go, that pressure vanish, and then the parasympathetic nervous system is the one that takes over, and is the one that repairs the cells, and is the one that fights against diseases. But why we get that level of stress? Why we don't get stress when we face, a dangerous dog, or a person who is wearing a knife and it's looking at us? Why we get stressed, as Sapolsky was saying, with so many things? We didn't have a clue about that. But 2,500 years ago, in another place in the world, some people discovered that. Let me see if I can. This is Kapilavatthu, And in Kapilavatthu was born a prince, Prince Gautama Siddhartha, who was aware of the suffering in the world. He didn't know anything about stress, he didn't know many things about diseases, but he knew that there was something which he called suffering, which was unnecessary. He could acknowledge the presence of pain. I hit my elbow against something, and of course, I feel the pain. But he intuitively discovered that there was something more. There was something that was causing a kind of strain in us, and that might be related to death, diseases, and all kinds of problems. So he started a search for many, many years. He's a remarkable human being. And he discovered that the problem is in the mind. There's something in our mind that is not working well. There's something in our mind who categorizes things, labels things, and it's not that much in touch, in contact with reality. So Buddha was the first one who designed, discovered a methodology to calm the mind without really looking for a healing process. He was looking for a way of really, getting rid of so much suffering that he was seeing all around him. So he was the person who created sati meditation. What do we call meditation? And because our mind is our companion at all times, even when we are asleep, we are not aware of how much noise the mind is making, how many disturbances our dualistic mind, our dysfunctional mind is creating. So, let me see if it works. So these monks, these Buddhist, okay, let me go back. These Buddhist monks discovered, taught by Buddha, that if they were able to calm the mind, the suffering started to disappear. Of course, they kept experiencing pain, but they were not experiencing suffering. And the difference is huge. The difference is huge. You can see how much we suffer with our worries, how much we suffer when we get angry, how much we suffer when we feel despair. That is created by the mind. That's not created by the physical world. It's created by our evaluation, our interpretation of the physical world. And these Buddhist monks started to practice this kind of approach, calming the mind, and of course, they didn't suffer so much. But that was something of the East, and in the West, we were not very interested. Surprisingly enough, in China at the same time, Lao Tzu, which was the person really at the beginning of Taoism, he discovered something also very remarkable, that we spend a lot of time looking back in the past and looking forward in the future. But we don't look in the past just to learn from it. It's just to regret something that we did in the past. And we are suffering the consequences now of some decision that we made many years ago. So we suffer just by going to the past and living that past, which was so painful for us, in the present. So we were suffering the present for something that happened maybe many years ago. And he also discovered that a lot of people spend a lot of time looking at the future, but not trying to plan ahead and say, okay, what's the best decision that I can make in order to get the results that they want? No, they were projecting their mind in the future, into the future, and worrying about things that hadn't happened yet. So he said that the only way to be happy, to be sane, was to remain in the present. And this is one of my mentors. Judson Brewer is a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist. He worked for many years at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland. Now he works at University of Massachusetts. And he is the pioneer in something which has a lot to do with all that we have been seeing so far. This is, I wrote a book, unfortunately it's not in English, it's called Tómate un respiro, in English would be Take a Breath, in which I explain his findings, but I will try to summarize his findings. Let's imagine that I am driving. Somebody brought me here, but let's imagine that I got my own car and I came here driving. And maybe you can relate with this experience. I spend most of the time thinking. I pay very little attention to what I'm going because I know there's like an automatic pilot which is driving the car. Well, this is called the default network, and it's also called the wandering mind. So I'm not present. I'm driving, but I'm not present. I am not focusing on the road. I'm not focusing on the traffic ahead, because I'm very busy, lost in my own thoughts, in my own images, my own feelings and sensations. Well, what Judson has discovered is that this wandering mind is not very effective, it's not very healthy, and it doesn't help us to achieve our goals. And one of the fascinating things is that when somebody trains in mindfulness, when somebody starts to practice, and we will do a practice at the end of the session, when somebody starts to practice mindfulness, there is a shift at that level. So the default network starts to work in a different fashion, and another part of the brain, which is more related with attention, with correct thinking, with creativity, with making decisions, take over. This is surprising because when you can see it, and I have had the opportunity of seeing it, when you see it, it's not the same as if somebody tells you, well, this is the way it happens. But when you see it, how it changes the mapping of the brain using different very sophisticated techniques, and you see how when this person who is with his wandering mind, lost in his thinking cloud, when this person starts to focus on his breathing, on his feelings, and so on and so forth, there's a shift in how that brain works. This is the part of the brain which is activated when we practice mindfulness. It's one of the parts of the brain. And this part, which has a very important role in all that has to do with making good decisions, understanding what's going on, learning, being attentive to what is really relevant, is the part of the brain that takes over. So another of my mentors, Richie Davidson, we will see in the session tomorrow, that fortunately enough takes place later in the day. We will see another of the pioneers, and now we know that when we stop that wandering mind, that, as Richie says, is an unhappy mind, it's not only that we feel a new kind of inner experience, like inner joy, it's also that we become much more effective. And that's very important because many of you are involved with creating new projects, with creating new teams. It's essential that you convey this sense that you really love what you're doing, that when somebody approaches you and wants to be part of your team, that person feels your positive energy, because you are having to deal with a lot of challenges throughout your pathway. So this kind of inner state is, without any doubt, now, it's really fostered by this kind of approach that we call mindfulness. So how does it work? And then we will do a practice. How does it work? The problem with our mind is that our mind has been polluted by some very deep beliefs. Of course, they work at a very deep level in the mind, at the subconscious mind, and it's not that easy to really see all those disempowering beliefs. So a lot of schools from the Western world have tried to get rid of those beliefs through a lot of approaches like psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, which work very well in many cases. But sometimes those wounds are so deep in us. Because, you know, when we were 4 years old, somebody, maybe in our family or at school or, you know, a friend, without bad intention, but out of ignorance, he told us, you will never, ever achieve anything remarkable. That was an opinion, that was not a fact, but we got it as a fact. And we put it very deep in our subconscious mind. And whenever we try to do something and we fail, immediately we explain why we fail. I will never, ever achieve anything remarkable. And this, as you could imagine, can cause a lot of suffering. That's the reason why many schools in psychology and psychiatry have been trying to solve that. And some of those approaches, there's no question that they're very effective. But sometimes they need another kind of help. So this mind, which is so hectic, doesn't allow us to experience our full potential. It's like when we are in front of the sea and we see the waves. I mean, if we try to see what's at the bottom of the sea, it's impossible with so many waves going on. Our waves are those thoughts, those ideas, those feelings, this wandering mind. So mindfulness is an approach, is a philosophy in the sense that what I have explained to you earlier, that our mind is creating all those kind of problems that Sapolsky was also talking about. But the approach, the tool that mindfulness uses, it's a way of driving your attention to a certain part of yourself, which is not your mind. It's not your thinking, it's not those feelings that trap us, where I will go next after this session finishes, and all those things. So you take your attention, you take your focus, and you put it on your tactile sensations, the sensations of your body. And then, naturally, the mind starts to calm. And when the mind starts to calm, we start to see fascinating things in ourselves. I will tell you from my own experience what kind of things you see. One of the things that you see is what is blocking you. For instance, let's imagine that I'm experiencing a kind of difficulty dealing in or being part of a team, being a team player, and I don't know where is difficulty coming from. I don't know, but I try to engage in the team and something is not working well, and I'm very puzzled with that because I don't know why. But when I am able to calm my mind, I can see that there's a lot of jealousy in me. A level of jealousy, fellows, that I haven't seen before. And I'm taken aback by that. I'm surprised. I didn't know that I experienced jealousy in such a high degree. But you are not judging you. Because if you start to judging you or feeling guilty or ashamed, you are blocking the process. You are just seeing it. It's a good piece of news because you wanted to be part of the team. You wanted to perform like a great team player. But something is preventing you from doing that. And now you're seeing it. So it's not the moment to feel guilty. It's not the moment to feel ashamed. It's the moment to celebrate that now you have seen the shape of that obstacle. And now you understand why you are having some difficulties, some problems being a team player, because in that team there's somebody who is very brilliant. He has great ideas. And your jealousy reacts to that and creates an emotional state, affects your brain in such a way that you feel very uneasy in that team and you cannot produce any good ideas because the most effective part of the brain is not working properly. If you acknowledge that and say, well, I'm going to choose something different, I still feel the jealousy. I'm a human being. There's no problem with that. But I will not be stopped by that jealousy at the time of being part of a team. And I choose to express what we call empathic joy, which means I rejoice in the talent, in the brilliance of that other player. So when I approach the team, of course I will feel the weight of this jealousy, trying to create that mental atmosphere which in some way pushes me out of the team. But because I have decided that I'm going to express my joy because he's so brilliant, little by little, I will understand several things. First, that I can not only be part of that team and enjoy being part of that team, but also that I can give some proposals, some ideas that might be surprising even for myself, because my creativity has been unleashed. This is one of the reasons why practicing mindfulness has been so crucial, so important working in teams. So remember, this is one of the things that you can see. You can see some things that you don't like about you. Carl Gustav Jung called it the shadow. You don't like it. I have my jealousy, I have my pride, I have my fears, I have my rage, I have my ignorance. But that's okay if I see it, because if I see it, I can handle it. The second thing that you will start to see is quite amazing. I'm not talking about something that I have been reading about. I'm talking about something that I have experienced myself. You start to see some things. You start to have some experiences that changes completely your perception about the world. When you felt absolutely unable to deal with a challenge, you started to see in yourself a potential that allows you to have the deep conviction that you can, of course, deal with that challenge in an effective way. So we're going to practice one of those exercises. We have like 9 minutes, more or less. I will get closer to this. And, I would ask from you to take the position, which is an important thing. You sit comfortably in your chair, but it's important that you uncross your legs. So if you have your legs this way, you uncross your legs. If you have your arms crossed, you uncross them and you allow them to lay on your thighs. Palms up. You can cross your hands here, but not your legs or your arms, because it doesn't work so effectively. The spine needs to be straight without strain, sin demasiada tensión. Recta sin demasiada tensión. And the neck straight without strain. El cuello estirado sin demasiada tensión. Okay? That's it. When we start the exercise, you will see the present, you will notice the presence of your wandering mind. You will start, thinking about some things, worrying about other things. Don't feel guilty about that. Just be aware that your mind is wandering, and you, in a friendly way, you take back your attention to the tactile sensations in the body. That's it. I have practicing it for some time, and still my mind wanders. And my mind is wandering, I take it back. So the effectiveness of the approach is not that you don't have any thinking. When some people say you have to stop having thinking, they don't know what they are talking about. You will have thinking, but that's okay. The thing is that thinking doesn't trap you. You become aware, I have been wandering, that's okay, I return to my breathing, I return to my body. Is it clear so far? Okay. Don't have anything in your mouth, no chewing gum, no candies. It's important, because you will feel a kind of relaxation, and if you have a candy with chewing gum, that could be a little bit dangerous. Okay? Is it clear? Okay, let's go. So, I would invite you to close your eyes. If you feel more comfortable with your eyes open, just reduce the opening of your eyes. So that your eyes, whether are closed or slightly open, and you start to feel your body from the head to the tip of the toes. It's not about imagining your body. It's about noticing the tactile sensations of your body. And if your mind wanders off, you become aware of that. And in a friendly way, you don't need to be harsh. In a friendly way, you take your attention back to the sensations in your body. Now focus on your face and allow the forehead to relax, to release all the tension. Focus on your eyes, around the eyes, and release all tension in your eyes. Allow the cheeks and the jaw to relax. And now, allow your spine from the neck to the tailbone to relax, to release all tension. Notice your shoulders. They are like a coat hanging from a hanger. Allow your thighs, your legs and your feet to release all the tension. Allow the arms, the forearms, the wrists, the hands and the fingers to release all tension. And now, focus your attention on your belly, your soft belly. And observe the gentle movements of the belly while you inhale and while you exhale. You are calming your mind just by taking your attention to your soft belly. Every time that you exhale, more and more tension is released from your body. And the sense of calm, peacefulness starts to grow, to be more evident. And now we are going back to the level of consciousness from where we started. And I would ask from you to pay attention to the whole of your body, the sensations of your whole body. And now please take 1, 2, or 3 deep breaths and open slowly your eyes. 1, 2, 3 deep breaths, and open slowly your eyes. So now, I would ask from you to stretch your arms. That's very important to recover the tone of your body. Okay, that's very, very important. That's the reason why these kind of exercises are so good, and why many people have incorporated yoga exercises in the practice of mindfulness. Okay, I hope this was something of value for you, at least to start your research. Tomorrow we will continue at 10 o'clock in a different session. We will explore some of the findings of one of my mentors, Richard Davidson, and we will practice for what is for me the most beautiful of all meditations, of all approaches of mindfulness, which is called loving kindness meditation. It's metta. It's very effective, especially if you have a difficult relationship with somebody who is dear to you, or somebody who is at the workplace and you need to create a new kind of relationship. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you.